Welcome to Season 2 of the Pivot Point podcast. This season, we are featuring Candid Conversations. We're interviewing industry experts and leaders about candid conversations they've had that involve gender in some way. They're going to fill us in on what happened, what prevented them from addressing it, the risks they took in that conversation, why they chose to say something, and how they handled it, and what happened next. Stay tuned for Pivotal Stories, a Positive Change. Today, we have incredible special guests. We actually have a duo, a male ally and a female leader from Developer Town. So first, I'll introduce Sena, who is with us. And Sena Hineline has been in marketing and technology for over 15 years. She is currently a senior marketing strategist at Developer Town. Alongside her, she has Mike Kelly, who is one of the founders of Developer Town, a co-founder of Full Stack, a founder of Tenant Tracker, and a co-founder of Startup Competitors. Whew, that's a lot of startups. And he is an active investor, advisor, board member, and a number of other startups. So he's the host of the Startup Competitors podcast, which looks at how to leverage knowledge of the market and competition to develop product and business strategy. And he is the co-host along with his oldest son of Kelly Farms podcast, which attempts to explore hobby farming, parenting, and growing up on a farm. Well, Sena, Mike, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Well, what a great set of experience you have. And as leaders in the technology community, I'm looking forward to hearing your perspectives on gender equality in the tech space, what it takes to get more women there and retain more women. But before we get started, in Season 2, we are focusing on a candid conversation to kick us off. And so I'd love for you both to share a candid conversation around this topic that our listeners could learn from.
Awesome. Well, maybe I'll kick things off and set the context for the conversation. And to do that, maybe to go back in time a little bit and talk a little bit about where some of this conversation starts. So at Developer Town, we launched in 2010. And when we launched, it was originally a super small team of maybe 5 people or 5 original founders when we started. And today we've grown, it's like 8 years later, and we've grown to be around 50-ish people in the core Developer Town business. And then we have a handful of other employees in some of the other businesses that we have. So I think in total, we're maybe just over 70 employees across all the Developer Town companies. And one of the things that's interesting about that growth curve, if you chart that from a leadership perspective, is culturally some of the things you can do when it's 5 co-founders and maybe a handful of early employees, when you're an early startup, basically working out of the equivalent of a garage, and what you can do when you have 70-ish employees and of all backgrounds and diverse in genders and interests and years of experience and things like that are very different. But of course, as a leader, nobody comes up to you and taps you on the shoulder, normally looking at you, Sena, and gives you feedback about how maybe some of the things that you used to do when you were a smaller startup with less diversity may not be appropriate now that you're a larger company that has a bunch of different stakeholders. And so I think the story that Sena and I want to share is a really interesting story, because I think most people like me aren't always aware of how their actions are going to be perceived. And maybe even something that's always been acceptable in the past may not be so acceptable now, because the circumstances have changed and the people involved have changed. Okay, so that's a little bit of the background. That's why I thought it was an interesting story. And maybe I'll set the scene for the situation that was happening and let Sena jump in kind of where she did in real life.
There you go.
Okay, so every year we do a company party. We do a couple of company parties every year, but one of the things we like to do is kind of a summer party, end of summer party, where we try to get everybody out of the office for a few hours. And traditionally, we have hosted that at one of the founders' houses. I've hosted in the past at the farm, and Michael Florin has hosted in the past at his house. He has a wickedly awesome house out in Zionsville, swimming pool, lake, tons of yard, all that kind of stuff. And was this last year?
Yeah, families included.
Yeah, families included. So it's employees, families, kids. It's like a full crazy thing, which is normally a ton of fun, gives people to get a chance to get to know each other outside of work, see families, have kids play together, stuff like that. And this year, when we were planning that last year, when we were planning that party at Mike's house, of course, for the organizers, which I'm always a part of that, it seemed like a good idea to have kids able to swim in the pool. We had scheduled a lifeguard. We were thinking of all the different activities that could make it a fun environment for kids, which we kind of maybe keep them out of the hair of the adults, so the adults could have fun and socialize as well.
Yeah, so as that was happening, there are a fair number of females who work at Developer Town. And I had a couple of them on various occasions come up to me, both with and without kids and spouses, who were concerned about the pool aspect of it, because it would mean being in swimming suits in front of colleagues and coworkers. And so there was some concern about, well, I don't want to swim. I don't want to be in a bathing suit in front of people I work with. That's a little awkward. And then for those of us, I have 2 children. For those of us who have kids, it was a little bit like, well, even though my spouse is going to be there, I have 2 kids, so I can't really pawn it off on him to do that part of it. So everyone was, sort of, well, do we go? Do we not go? What's happening? From the female side of Developer Town. And so finally, I just sort of literally tapped Kelly on the shoulder and asked him if we could have an uncomfortable conversation really quickly. And kind of dragged him into a house, which all of our offices here are tiny houses. So grabbed him for a quick 5-minute conversation to sort of explain why he may be noticing that a large portion of the female staff was responding no to the party, to kind of try and explain why that might be happening.
Yeah, and it's an interesting perspective for me because one, I'm an idiot. Stuff like that's not even on my radar, and that's probably true for most leaders. Like we're very much focused on the big idea, right? Like we need to have a party, we need to have family, and not often thinking of or sweating the details and stuff like that, which that feedback is super valuable to get, especially real time like that, so we can make some adjustments. So that's kind of number one. And then number two, once we had the feedback, it was a super simple thing to fix.
Yeah.
Without even disrupting or even making it a difficult conversation. I believe the way that we handled it was to say, hey, the lifeguard canceled. So, for safety purposes, we're just going to close the pool. Which is a nice way of not pointing out that anybody was uncomfortable or anything like that. It just completely avoids maybe a sensitive conversation, while acknowledging that if that's a big detractor for a large group of the company, that we want to feel welcome and involved, that we just don't have to do it.
Yeah. And I think from my perspective, it was nice because it wasn't a thing where you get called out publicly for having a conversation that could potentially be uncomfortable. And then too, so that it doesn't look like an issue and you don't sort of do that boy versus girl, well, we can't have nothing nice because you guys are uncomfortable.
Yep.
Kind of a conversation happening. So it took it out of the realm of increasing sort of the awkward male-female of it all and just took it off the table entirely, which was, I think, unique. I think there are a lot of leaders who would have taken that feedback and wouldn't have gone with the solution that didn't escalate. So that was great from my perspective, and gave us, the ability to still have a really fun family party. Nothing was ruined. Nobody noticed anything out of the ordinary. Everybody still had a great time. But it also allowed, the female staff here at Developer Town to be able to not have to worry about sort of that, interpersonal social mores around, well, I don't want to look like I'm not there to have fun. And it took all of that out of the mix.
Mm-hmm. Well, and my favorite part of that conversation is you simply tapping Mike on the shoulder, Sena, and saying, hey, can we have an uncomfortable conversation? I really think that gumption that you had, and obviously the trust that you have built in working together over the years, shows in a situation like that.
Yeah, well, I think especially here at Developer Town, the founders and the managing partners, we're pretty blunt people. It's kind of part of our culture is to be honest, to speak your truth, and to come at things from a point of trying to be, always learning and helping one another. So I think the culture here really lends itself to being able to have those conversations without feeling weird about it or uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I think that probably my age in comparison to the rest of the staff may have played a part in my feeling the most comfortable to do it. After you've been in the industry for a while, you've seen all kinds of uncomfortable conversations happening. And being a mom, you sort of stop having any real shame because you're dealing with kids running around and embarrassing you all the time. So you're pretty willing to just be like, hi, this is weird. Can we talk about it really quick so it doesn't get weirder?
I think that's her polite way of saying I'm one of her kids.
Well, I think, Mike, what you shared too is like, it just wasn't on my radar, right? I didn't think about what it was going to be like to wear a bathing suit in front of people I work with. And for women, it is a bit different than men. And wanting to keep it family friendly, that was obviously with great intention, right? And just unknowing about the other consequences or the other perceptions about that. So
yeah, exactly. That was the other important part too, is that it wasn't something that was set up it wasn't coming from any bad place, right? Like they just wanted to make sure that almost everyone here has kids. Every time we do an event, it's very family focused and it's awesome. So there was no intent that was other than let's get everyone together and have a great time as a big family, which I think made the conversation easier to have too, because I knew that the mics weren't coming at it from a perspective of trying to do anything untoward or make anybody uncomfortable. They just wanted the kids to be able to have a good time. And if there's a pool there, all the kids are going to want to be in it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Great example. That is just such a great example of a small challenge. And like you said, if you didn't address it, it could have gotten bigger. And it can have that ripple effect in your culture if we continue to not have these somewhat difficult but necessary candid conversations. So love the story, love the example, love the partnership between you addressing that head on. I'm curious, as people that have been in the tech space for quite some time, we're continuing to hear about the initiatives, right, to get girls involved in STEM and to get more women in tech and retain women in tech. And, Sena, I know you're highly involved in Women in High Tech, a great organization here in Central Indiana. I'm wondering, what are your perspectives of this topic? What do you think is happening right now? Where do you think we are right now? And where do you think we're headed in the future?
Well, so from my perspective, I have been working in Indianapolis, and then prior to moving back home, I was working in San Francisco. And I've actually had more female bosses than male, which is a little anomalous, and have worked with a bunch of females in tech. And I think I've worked with a fair amount of guys in the tech space who are very committed to diversity, who have hiring practices that are committed to creating a diverse environment because they know that all kinds of diversity are important in order to get the best minds in the room. Even given that, I think that, just like you said, some of the initiatives to get younger girls into things that are technology and coding, I think that's really where it has to start, because as far as I've seen in my personal experiences, it's not that the people I'm working with and for are uninterested in hiring female developers, designers, from all levels. It's that there's a supply issue. So I think having a broader spectrum of people involved in the technology spaces helps to enable that diverse set of folks being in the hiring pool. Because when you open a job rec and you only get, you may get 150 resumes, but only one of them is a female, that it's really hard to have hiring the best mind, but also diversity in place when, if you have a 50-50 split of resumes, it gives you a little bit better ability to choose the best candidate, but also have the options for diversity.
Yeah, I would echo that. And we feel that from a hiring perspective perspective across the board, not just diversity in terms of gender, but racial diversity, backgrounds, even age diversity is actually an interesting one for us, which you don't always see at all companies, but because we're a smaller company, we tend to attract younger people. And if you're older, you see startup, and sometimes might be something you shy away from if you have deeper experience. So for us, like, how do we increase diversity in the talent pipeline, and what are the ways that we can be engaged in the community in ways that highlight it's something that we care about? So maybe the halo effect of that will start to get people who may not otherwise think of us as an employer of choice to start to think of us, is super interesting. So over the last few years, we've had a couple of things go our way. One, because we've grown and added new lines of business and new departments to Developer Town, that's increased, I think, some of our ability to hire, even in areas outside of STEM. We've been able to pick up more diversity, which has been phenomenal. And then we've also been lucky enough to be successful enough that we can sponsor events and have a presence and be involved in the community on a level that I think is harder for smaller companies.
Yeah. So we've done stuff with TechPoint Foundation for Youth, which helps bring technology to kids in the classroom and gets them interested in coding at an early age. There's a public school right near us where we've gone. Mike and I actually went together and did the hour of code with a classroom full of kids. So that was super entertaining. And we've done things with women in high tech. We are as a company, are part of that organization. So what Mike did say is he's also a member of Women in High Tech.
We're also involved in Startup Ladies as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we've done Ignite Your Superpower event. So we as a company try to really focus, I think, which circles even back to the topic we were talking about with the party. We're very focused on youth and on education and on sort of helping our community grow in the ways that we see as beneficial to our and the community's future.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. So as you've evolved from a startup to now a mid-sized company, your reach has expanded. You have diversified roles that you can bring. People that may not have been attracted to technology or startup work can now come in and have more options for careers. So great points and great vantage points and where you've been and where you're going. One interesting statistic I was reading in a report about women in technology is this whole supply and demand thing, right? There's so much demand and just very little supply, to your point, Sena. And where is that breakdown occurring? Because there's so much focus on getting girls exposed to STEM early on. And I thought something interesting in this latest report was that young women often get exposed to tech through friends and family, where boys are more exposed in school. And so they're naturally drawn to some of those, technology types of curriculum classes and such, just from a young age, as early as middle school. And so I'm curious about that. Did you find that to be the case for you, Sena? Or, would you agree or disagree with some of that research?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that for young girls, a lot of their mindset is more towards group activities and learning from their friends. So if you have a friend who's interested in Minecraft, right, then you want to learn that too. You tend to congregate to that because it's a shared interest. And I know for myself, I didn't have very many role models when I was younger who were into technology. I grew up in Brown County, Indiana. It's not a huge tech hub. So my sort of exposure to it was really with my first couple of jobs, and having seen some of the things that were going on and having an interest in it. And then marrying a developer, so honing my developer to normal people talk skills. So I think it's a lot about making sure that we as women in the workforce are providing the younger generation with role models and with people that they can watch doing these things and understand that it's not too hard for them, it's not too scary, and it's not something they should shy away from. Because even though we may be in the classroom, that's not always the best way to reach somebody gender neutral. It's really how they learn and how they interact with the world around them. And if they have role models and that's the way that they perceive the world, then that's great. And if they have classroom experiences and that's the way they perceive the world, then that's great too. But we need to make sure we're providing a mix, which is why I think it's great when you can have a company who will go and do the hour of code, and we specifically tried to ensure that we sent diverse groups out to each of those hours so that the girls in the room would see someone else doing it who was a female and would know that this is possible for you too.
Yep. Yeah. That's great. That's great. Well, and just wrapping up our conversation today, a few nuggets I've pulled from both of you is, to this point about role models, Sena, absolutely. We have to see it to believe it. And there's so much we're looking constantly around us for people that resemble us that we want to be like someday. So I think you're absolutely dead on there. And Mike, I think what you share is a real vulnerability for putting yourself out there in these, not easy situations, whether it's a candid conversation or when you and I have had coffee before and you just said, hey, we're not getting it right, but we're working on it. We're going to be better about this. And being an ally to these women's organizations in technology and being willing to step into a conversation that may not always be easy to step into, and creating a culture where everyone can engage and speak up and share their perspective. So I welcome that. I'd love to see more of that. I love these ideas that you've shared with our audience today. Just in closing, I'd love to give you a shout out, other than Developer Town, certainly you can follow them on social media, but other ways that they can connect with you, Mike and Sena.
Oh, I'm first. Okay. So I'm on Twitter at Michael_D_Kelly. And from there, you can find all the other various Twitter companies that we're involved in from my profile there. And then, I blab on quite a bit on my own podcast, the Startup Competitor podcast that you mentioned earlier, and would love to have people jump over there and listen. We talk to a lot of Indianapolis-based companies there. We've hit a couple of companies down in Nashville getting ready to do the circuit in Chicago. So it's mostly Midwest-focused startups and sitting down a little bit of strategy with them. And it's a pretty good insight into the way I think as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, then I'm on LinkedIn personally, and then sort of behind the scenes some of the time helping to run the Developer Town Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. So if they want to see our crazy shenanigans, they can head over to Instagram.
Great pose, great action shots you do.
If you want to know a little known fact about Sena and something never promotes or talks about, she's also written a couple of books. Sena, would you be willing to tell people the title of your book if they want to find it on Amazon?
Sure.
Way to be an ally, Mike.
Way to put me on the spot, Mike. So I've actually written and published 2 books. They're about vampires. So, it's nothing tech, nothing marketing. But they are under Hineline, and the first in the series is called Hunting.
Ooh, so intriguing. I love that. What a neat, awesome passion project. So we'll be sure to link to all of those great resources for our listeners. And thanks so much, Mike and Sena, for being on. Awesome conversation.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Pivot Point podcast and our candid conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to share it with a friend or subscribe to our channel. You can also follow us at Next Pivot Point on social media and check out our website for free, amazing resources to support your candid conversation journey. It's www.nextpivotpoint.com. Thank you.